Skot sak ke hoamas kusia. Skopism ta jakaso. Skosi pitam chua.
We're Cree. We're Cree, and that's where our knowledge has to come from.
Education is an investment.
Because I'm not doing justice to education. I'm advocating for education, but I'm not doing justice to it.
But the bottom line for me is we need to be responsible.
If you respect your treaty rights, use that education to your benefit.
And some of the students, you're like, I wonder how far they will go.
But it's the whole system that's been set up for failure from the beginning.
On June 21st, 1899, the 8th treaty between Indians of North America and the Queen of England was signed. The signatories of Treaty 8 agreed to its terms for reasons of peace and friendship. Treaty 8 encompasses a landmass of approximately 840,000 square kilometers that covers northeastern British Columbia, southwest portion of the Northwest Territories, Northern Alberta, and northwestern Saskatchewan. The Treaty 8 territory is home to 39 First Nations communities that represent 5 language groups: Cree, Chipewyan, Beaver, Dene, and Michif. In Alberta alone, there are 17 First Nations operated schools in the Treaty 8 territory. Today, the treaty is still recognized, and many Native leaders see Treaty 8 as a nation-to-nation treaty that recognizes our rights to maintain a traditional way of life without restriction. Treaty 8 also includes rights to tax exemptions, medical care, and education. The treaty was a promise that was to be kept for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. Our Treaty 8 communities are remote communities. Some you need to fly in or take an ice road just to get there. The least remote of our Treaty 8 schools is still 3.5 hours north of Edmonton. Being remote and the obvious costs associated with that is only the beginning of the issues our education system faces.
We're such a small, isolated community. Everybody knows each other.
Here, you're known by your name, and then you know who your family is, and then you know who your grandparents are, and it's like, it's a whole down the line that you know personally, right?
Everybody's related. Everybody knows each other's cookums, each other's Muslims. So it does take its toll when we have students that are part of a family rivalry, or if there's something that happens outside of the school that comes into the school, it takes away from the teacher, actually taking that time to teach the kids.
Because we live in an era of the residue of residential school, the residue of alcohol and drug abuse situations, and you're put into a situation where you got to teach the kids of these families that are lost to begin with.
Our parents have been silenced because, well, how can they fit in? They've been told all along that they're not good enough and that they don't fit in, and quit talking your language, quit doing that. Well, we still see that alive and well in this community, and that barrier is very real.
While there are many, even in our own Native community, who say we need to move on from blaming the government and the residential schools for our problems, there is a growing movement in our communities that is focusing on forgiveness, reconciliation, and understanding the intergenerational impacts of colonization. So for those who say, move on from residential schools, quit blaming them for our problems, all you need to do is look at our on-reserve schools today, and you can still see the impact of the residential school system, starting with our children's parents.
The residential school experience, the oppression, the being displaced, being taken out of their homes and not allowed to speak their language and culture, we're still dealing with that impact, very much so. Yeah, there's no question. There's like a group of silent parents. And honestly, I believe that to be the effects of the residential school. There's still residual effects of that, and one of that is the silence.
It's been a real struggle, even to that aspect where we're trying to work with young moms where we are instilling that education is important. We have to go back to ground zero to build, to make education a priority here. And that's not an easy task.
When you just have just a teacher saying, okay, you could do this, and that's it, and the parents aren't there. And then you know that they're lucky if they're going to make it to grade 9.
When we have parent-teacher interviews, there's not very many parents that show up. And for a long time, education was the focal point of our community. It's no longer there.
The children that are doing well. That's basically the parents that we see, for the most part. But in terms of coming in to do any kind of volunteering or spending time with their kids in the classroom, we see very little of that.
We don't have funding to hire somebody to be like a family school wellness worker or a liaison worker to work with those parents and to bring them in or to go and do home visits, things like that. So we don't have the resources and the money to build those ties and to build those bridges.
If we don't educate the parents, I think we're fooling ourselves in thinking that we've educated the child.
The core of the issue is about the quality of education our children are receiving.
Top students from here, the parents moved to Fort McMurray, and those students are 2-3 grades behind when they went to school in Fort McMurray.
We might have a student that's, an excellent artist, but if we don't have an art class or we don't have, an awesome art program, then we lose that child.
Parents are sending their children off to public school system because of the access to the swimming pools, to the recreation programs, to the, quality libraries that are in those communities. All of those are relevant to education. And it doesn't matter where you come from. You want to be part of that. You want to be part of a team. And I can't offer those here.
They lose interest quite fast because it's not bringing out something that particular student has, is good at something. And so we can't foster some of those talents that some of our students have because, we're so limited on the programming and the resources. The kids are not getting all the same experiences as, a school like that's part of the province, a provincial school, or that's in the city or close to the city.
People are not staying in school after a while, after maybe 13, 14, then you start losing the children.
I don't have the exact graduation rate for a school, but I would estimate that it's probably 20-25%. So the student body is an intelligent one, but when we reach grade 7, students start to drop off. But I haven't seen it in other schools that I've been in, where you'd have a concentration of young girls, young women, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, who are who have suddenly lost interest in learning. I've talked to these students. Many of them would like to leave here. They'd like to leave Fort Chip and the school and go to school elsewhere. They said that there's a lot of things that impinge on their learning. Of all the things that have frustrated me in the 2 years I've been here, that's the most frustrating thing for me, is my inability and our staff's inability and our school's inability to be able to change the thinking of some of our teenage girls.
First Nations operated schools, while funded federally, are just that, run by the First Nation. And for many teachers, principals, and education directors, it is simply about survival. Education becomes secondary in the face of multiple paralyzing issues. including governance.
The government legislates school boards to make decisions for them. And they have all kinds of second level services, the PED supervisors, the math consultants, the psychologists, so on and so forth. Band operated schools have no such thing. There are no second and third level services for us. There is nobody to speak on our behalf. There's no board. There's no governing body saying you should be doing this, you should be doing that, I'm coming in to check on you. You know, all that stuff. That's all missing from our education system. We don't have a school board. We're governed by chief and council.